Welcome to Road to Recovery.
Welcome to Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents with Sagi Shaked. Sagi is founder of Shaked Law Personal Injury Lawyers and is ranked as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the United States by the American Trial Lawyers Association. With a wealth of experience in personal injury, wrongful death, and complex litigation cases, he passionately advocates for victims and has recovered multi-million-dollar settlements in damages for his clients. I'm Heidi Mack, and today we're diving into multi-truck collisions. What makes them different, and why do they require a legal heavyweight? This episode is called When Multi-Trucks Are Involved, the Legal Maze of Multi-Truck Collisions. Welcome back, Sagi. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Heidi.
All right. Well, for our first question here, what makes multi-track collisions more complex than a typical two-vehicle crash?
So, in a typical two-vehicle crash, whether you have a crash with a car and a truck, you're really just investigating the truck and the driver and every other potential party related to that truck. But when you have multiple vehicles and multiple drivers, the crash scene can be chaotic and very difficult to investigate. You'll see it where there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 cars in a chain reaction. They pile up. It's hard to pinpoint who started the crash, or what crash was, what damage was escalated by another vehicle or truck. Multiple parties may share fault, which again complicates the legal process and the insurance process. And then obviously, when you have a multiple car wreck, we've all seen it in news and or on social media. There's risk of severe injuries from multiple hits, fatalities, and large scale damage to vehicles and property.
So, yeah, I mean, like you said, it's very hard to see who is liable. So, how does that get sorted out with multiple commercial trucks when they're all involved?
Yeah, so that's where it gets really sticky, right? So you have liability among several, whether it's cars or drivers, and then you have different trucking companies involved and their degree at fault. So the investigation is where it really becomes critical that we focus on who was negligent, why were they negligent, were they distracted, was it speeding, were they following too quickly? And then you start having issues of what they call comparative fault or comparative negligence and contributory negligence in the different states that you're in. So it really depends on what state you're in. So we'll use Florida, for example, where starting in March 24th of 2023, we changed from what's called pure comparative fault, where it didn't matter if you were 30% at fault, you still were going to collect the 70% from the at fault driver. So that was the law. And then it changed on March 24th, 2023 to what they call modified contributory negligence or modified comparative negligence, where if you're found more than 50% at fault, it's 50.1% at fault, you get nothing. So if they caused you $100,000 damage and you're 51% at fault, in Florida, you'll get nothing. And that's a lot of the way the states are. Now, there are some states that still apply the old comparative fault, which is if you're 70% at fault, you're still going to get 30% of the recovery. So it just depends on the state that you're in, so we can determine who's at fault, you know, how complex is the case going to get. The more complex, the more drawn out you're going to get in litigation if there's multiple parties at fault, because they're each going to say, not me, look over there. So that happens, and it becomes a lot more, again, chaotic to try to figure out who's at fault.
So then I'm assuming that this accident reconstruction plays a major part in these pileups. Like, how does that work?
That's a good assumption. I mean, anytime you have multiple accidents, we're trying to figure out who caused the crash, who was the initial driver that started this whole chain reaction, how many hits were there. So we're using the accident reconstruction experts to look at the physical evidence, the skid marks, the vehicle positions immediately after the crash, the data that they get from the vehicles to recreate the sequence of events. And so the data that they would get would be from that black box that we spoke about. That'll help determine the speeds. They then want to look at the vehicles to determine the points of impact and any actions taken by the drivers. And a lot of times you can't figure that out until you get into litigation and take their depositions. So that's, critical for us for proving who caused the crash or who contributed to the crash, especially when you have people have conflicting stories or different stories. And then what you'll see is a lot of times there'll be a reconstruction and 3D animation or modeling
Oh,
of the crash and how it occurred. We now have the ability to have, again, the interior camera of the vehicle and the exterior camera of the vehicle. And then there's something called telematics, where we can find out everything about that driver and what they've been doing for the last, days upon days, every hour. There's AI in the telematics that tell us everything that's going on with the driver. So we would have a better idea if if this driver was fatigued, um, tired, or just not paying attention to the roadway.
with all these cars and, multiple trucks that could be involved in something like this, there's probably multiple insurance companies too. Do they tend to cooperate together, or is it just horrible?
I wish they would, but insurance companies,
Okay.
they're a business, right? So they're looking out
Mm.
for their best interests. So they are not going to work together. They're going to work into whatever protects their bottom line, and that's why I say before when we talked about witnesses on the other episode, it was they're going to get to the witnesses, and sometimes witnesses change their minds. So insurance companies always want to protect their own exposure, and they'll blame each other freely. Even if on another case they were together, um, it's rare where they're not pointing fingers at each other or disputing the coverage or who's at fault. And then you have my clients, the victims, who get caught up in this crossfire. And then that's why you need a strong legal representation to take you to the finish line, because you're not dealing, one, insurance companies aren't on your side. And two, when they have the chance to blame someone else, they're always going to put the blame on someone else and never take responsibility.
Yes, talking about the victims' rights, how do you protect them with all this, pushback and, with fault and everything?
The first thing we do in any trucking case, and really in any auto case, is number one, we want to preserve the evidence, and then we want to document the injuries. So to do that, it's like a legal maze. You really got to hire an attorney that knows what they're doing in the field of trucking. Again, anyone who needs the preservation letter, feel free to reach out to me. I will give you my preservation letter. There's nothing to hide. All the insurance companies for all these trucking companies have seen it. Obviously, it's not the same preservation letter every time. We tweak it to the specific case. So we want to make sure that we put all the potential liable parties and their insurance companies on notice. And when I say notice, notice to preserve the evidence, but also on notice, hey, put your insurance on notice. They're going to be paying in this case. If my client's injured, they're going to be paying. And then once you get into litigation, you want to really aggressively push the discovery. If you're not pushing the case, insurance companies know which lawyers push and which lawyers just sit there and do nothing. You really have to push your case. You got to get it to trial in order to get real justice for your clients.
So I'm assuming all evidence then is critical when it comes to these cases?
Yeah, everything from photos to videos of the scene. Lately, we're getting more and more videos of how the crashes occurred, whether it's through the dash cam or sometimes you have surveillance from the local establishments or the street cam.
Mhm.
The black box data, that electronic recording of the event device, that will tell us what really happened at the time of the collision. The telematics, we spoke about that earlier, that is instrumental in these cases. Drivers under federal law are required to keep logs of how often they drive, when they stop, when they take their rest breaks, when they're doing their pre-trip inspections. We like to get the phone records. I like to get the toll receipts, the hours of service data. Witness statements are key to any case. So I would say witness statements, the law enforcement accident reports, And then the maintenance records and the safety policies that the trucking companies have. I want to see it all. The more information I have, the better I can represent the client and get them justice on the case.
I mean, I've even thought, because social media is such a huge part of like, is that would that be helpful or, not helpful?
Absolutely
Yeah,
helpful. I mean,
I'm curious.
we've had truck drivers post about how the crash occurred. Sometimes they post after the crash. Sometimes they're actually doing posts while driving. Believe that. How scary that is. Imagine they're driving 80,000 pounds, going 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, and they're doing live posts, live recordings on the social media. So when you're out there, be careful. And then for truck drivers, just don't do that. But they do it anyways. There's something called common sense, but there's really nothing common about common sense because some people don't apply common sense. So we have what I like to call common understandings, where we
Yeah,
all understand we shouldn't do things. Some people still do them.
right.
Um, Doing videos. I mean, we had one guy. He was a driver. Um, he had multiple social medias with Instagram. So it wasn't one username, it was multiple usernames. And once we got that, the case resolved really quickly because what was on one of them was not what was on the other. Very interesting. So it's a good point that you brought up.
Wow, wow, wow. So, are there often federal investigations or oversight in these cases?
Yeah, absolutely. So anytime a crash occurs, what you'll see is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, they get involved. They want to know about every fatality, every injury. Anytime there was an accident or a crash, they may investigate the crash, but you have to report it. If you're a trucking company, you're supposed to report every crash to the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and then they start rating the trucking companies. And the reason they rate is you have a lot of brokers who broker deals, and they need to know, is this a safe trucking company or is this not a safe company? Do they have experience? Do they not have experience? So those investigations are critical for people who are looking to make a claim against the broker. For sometimes the brokers are looking for the cheapest transport, and sometimes the cheapest transport is the most dangerous transport. And then you have people who they die because the trucking companies are cutting corners. They're letting people drive way too many hours, even though there's rules about that. And it still happens. So federal investigations and oversight do play a critical role in the trucking industry.
Then to sum things up here, what do you want victims in these complex cases to know from the very beginning?
Um, Most important is evidence disappears fast. So you need to act quickly to protect your interests. If you're an attorney representing people injured in these crashes, you've got to act quickly. If you're doing it, don't do it alone. Get an attorney that has experience. Um, the trucking companies and insurance companies, they don't do the right thing. Don't trust them to do the right thing. Their adjuster may call you and be nice to you on the phone, whether you're an attorney or trying to do it on your own. They're not there to help you. They're there to save them money. That's all it's about. It's the bottom line with these insurance companies and trucking companies. And you have the right to get full compensation for the injuries and everything that you've gone through or your client's gone through. So don't give in to the first couple of offers. Make your attorney work. If you're an attorney, work these files, get your clients the justice they deserve, and don't be scared to go to trial.
Thank you again for this knowledge. And thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Road to Recovery. To connect with Sagi, visit shakedlaw.com. That is SHAKED law.com. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review if you have found today's episode helpful. Thank you so much, Sagi. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Heidi.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.